All right, well, I think we'll get started. We got a good group here. So welcome everybody to August um, Agency Admin webinar. So the agenda today, we are going to do the webinar reminders. We are going to go through the announcements, and then we'll do a policy review, just an updated funder access policy. And then training will be on managing households and data quality response types for social security numbers and date of birth. And then webinar reminders. So share any relevant information with the appropriate staff at your agency. Use the Q&A to ask questions. The attendance is collected by survey that is sent to you at the end of the session. And then the recording and notes will be sent out by Monday. Oh, actually, Monday's a holiday, so September 2nd. And then the deadline to complete will be the following Monday. Sorry about that mix up there. Forgot it was a holiday. Is Monday a holiday? Yeah, Monday's a holiday. Or that September 1st is a holiday, sorry.
I'm going to start with the first update just on the vendor change process. So we've touched on this a couple times in the past, but all three OCs in the Arizona, Maricopa, Balance State, as well as Pima County are looking at a new vendor. This has gone to the board for both Balance State as well as Maricopa County, and both continuums have approved for a work group to move forward with exploring what a contract with a new vendor would look like. Pima, I believe, their board is meeting this afternoon on the same topic. So not a lot of major changes at this point, but it is very possible in September that all three COCs will be working together to explore a new vendor to replace the current one we have in the state. So, um, Laura?
Thank you. So just another update is that the Dwell ROI or Dwell will have an ROI training, an additional one that will be Friday, September 19th, 9 to 10 a.m. and Monday, September 22nd, 3 to 4 p.m. And they also have a flyer, so this should be sent out with our notes next week. And then just another update is that the release of information change has been completed in Balance of State. So, universal kind of open accounts. And if the client declines to share, then you'll have to submit a ticket to us, letting us know that they don't want to share. Complete that ROI tab with a no, and then we'll go ahead and lock that account. And then just a reminder that we wanted to let you guys know not to deactivate or inactivate any users, but instead submit a ticket to us. There may be sometimes where a user may go on maternity leave or may be gone for some time, and you guys go to inactivate them. We just ask that you submit a ticket so that way we can activate them and know why their account isn't activated. Because if they do pull up in our no login reports, then we'll completely deactivate their account if we don't hear a response from them. So just to keep us in the loop, if you guys could submit a ticket to our help desk. And then at the end of this session, we'd love to hear your suggestions for improving our website. So if that's something that you guys have any feedback on, you guys can submit that to the Q&A and we'll keep track of those.
Okay. Another thing we talked about before, in addition to the potential vendor change, is funder access. So we've developed a policy in the past year. It's gone through a number of updates over the past couple of months based on some feedback from providers and funders. But just to level set, really the goal of this policy is to ensure the privacy policy is being correctly applied. We have lots of clients in the system. They send out ROI, privacy notices all over the place. And those have very specific, guidance on what we do with data, client data specifically. And so we just want to make sure that we're honoring what those documents say and make sure that we're really being mindful that the client's data is being shared in a way that they're being told or told is being shared. So to re-review in the past, and we've actually simplified it a little bit as well. But in terms of funder access, there's two types of access that are available. There's short-term monitoring and long-term access. Our short-term monitoring lasts just a couple of weeks, and this allows funders to get a temporary license to view client and account information within HMIS itself. So if a funder needs to do an audit, they can get a short-term monitoring license that is free of charge. Solari will loan that license to the funder, and the funder is then able to do any sort of audit, documentation, reviews, anything they might need within HMIS itself. The second option that we have is long-term access. We also call this funder access, but this would be sort of indefinite and ongoing access that would allow funders to be able to run reports over time and to view some data as well. But the real crux of that long-term access is that that funder would have an ongoing account that would not have an end date unless the funder chose to close that account, or if the recipient agency said, hey, can we deactivate that funder? We don't want them to have direct access to our data any longer. For the purpose of funders, the funder accounts are read-only accounts, as well as the short-term monitoring. So they are designed to be able to view information, but not to edit or modify information. As a result, if you are a funder, you may end up having two accounts, depending on your situation. Your primary account may be an agency admin account. You may be doing data entry, running reports, making corrections or modifying data, and that would be one account with your agency. Since we don't want funders to have modification ability for other agencies' data, that person would also need a second account that would be a read-only account. So in short, the first account would be for their own agency to maintain, update, modify their own agency's data. And the second account would be read-only in order to just view data and run reports on a recipient agency. Now, those are the two basic differences. Those are the most important differences between the short-term and long-term access. And as a note, the visibility does differ between both access point or access types. And the question we most commonly get from recipient agencies is, what data can the funder see? So if we go to the next slide, Stephanie, we'll kind of review that in a little more depth. So here you can see what a funder can see. There's short-term access and there's long-term access. And before I really get into too much detail, the real driver here is the short-term access. The funder can see most of the data in the system, and a long-term access that is more limited based on your agency's data sharing agreements. So at a default, if a short-term access, 15-day access, so they can do a audit for compliance purposes, a funder can see a client record, which includes the name, date of birth, veteran status, and social security number. They can see entry exits. They can also see ROIs, case managers, case plans, attachments, incidents, and services that have been entered under the program as well. And a funder can see assessments if specified. We don't, as a default, share assessment data that are not UDE or PDE information. If a funder was doing a short-term audit of your program and they needed to see a custom assessment for your agency, we can make that available, but it is not at a default. So the information that a funder can see with that short-term access is really that client record, entry exits, and a third bullet point, all the additional information like attachments, services, incidents, and so forth. But the assessments, we are still really owned by the agencies who custom assessment belongs to, and that's not necessarily available unless that recipient agency wanted it to be. Now, moving on to long-term access, you can see the type of data available is very similar, but the caveat, especially for bullet points 3 and 4, is that this information is limited based on data sharing. So a funder who has indefinite ongoing access can still see the client record, can still see entry exits, because that's really a fundamental need to run reports. And that's information that shares system-wide regardless of which agency you're part of, unless you're a protected program that does not share information. But for the third and fourth bullet points, that ROIs, case managers, assessments, the assessments that are custom to your agency share, but based on data sharing alone. So if I'm a funder and I have an indefinite long-term access account to view your agency's data, if your agency hasn't decided to actively share all your case notes with me previously, I'm not going to see them now. if your agency or recipient agency and you have not chosen to always share attachments and always share your assessments to the funder, as a funder, I'm still not going to see that information because you have chosen for that agency data to be within your agency only. And this is what we've set for long-term access so that they can see the information that's shared globally, but the funders can't see every piece of data that you have in your agency if you're a recipient and don't want to share that. And that's the real difference because the short-term access will allow you to see all that nitty-gritty information for up to 15 days, but that's a very limited, more intensive audit. And so that is the difference between, in terms of what a funder can see from short-term access and long-term access. So there's a lot of information there. So I'm going to see if there's any questions, but I have one in the chat. Let's see here. Does anybody else just want to read the question in the chat so it's not the same voice answering and asking the question?
I'll read it. It says, what kind of assessments are in HMIS that individuals would need to see, like the VI SPDAT? Are there others?
So from the funder perspective, I'm not really sure. I've most commonly heard information like the VI SPDAT is a good one. I could also see the need to see UDE or PDE information like income perhaps. We have had conversations with funders and recipient agencies in the past about things like client notes and case notes, but really it would be a case-by-case basis depending on the funder's contract with the recipient and what information they need to verify and audit the agency. But again, that can be very limited, and that can be a conversation with the recipient agency, so we're not oversharing information that they don't want the funder to view.
Erin from DES, as a funder, is there an updated new user form for this updated funder access?
We have created an updated form specifically around funder access. It also goes over this entire policy in detail, including describing exactly what funders can see for both short-term and long-term access. We can actually send this directly to you to review, but you can use this form instead to go ahead and request access to projects.
Another question from Lisa. It says, SSVF providers need to see services received from other agencies in order to know how much assistance a veteran has left. Is this information available?
So that is a great question. And this is a question I think will become a really big question if all three continuums do choose to go to a new vendor and become one database, because we have to resolve differences in privacy notices, the way information is shared and so forth. So I'll answer for Balance Estate and Maricopa at this time. And Maricopa and Balance Estate both treat this differently based on the privacy notice and the release of information. There's also a privacy plan, I believe, for both as well. So for Balance Estate, Balance Estate does share, according to their privacy notice and ROI, all information globally. So if a client does sign an ROI and does agree to share their information, everything will share. That includes entry exits, services, referrals, and so forth. Even assessments could share, but since custom assessments only sit in an agency and other agencies can't see it, that data is still protected. But for Balance Estate, the answer is yes. You can see those services as long as the client hasn't specifically requested that their information be locked from sharing. For Maricopa County, that is a little different. So in the privacy notice, in the privacy plan for Maricopa County, the elements that are shared globally are the UDE data elements, but not services, referrals, and other information is not specified to share globally. So if you have services, those are shared based on either not at all or based on an MOU or memorandum of understanding you have with other agencies. So just to make that clear, Balance Estate services will share unless the client requests their data be protected and not shared. For Maricopa County, services will not share at a default unless you're part of a data share with other agencies. And these are policies that we would like to sort of like for everyone in continuums, both continuums to be more knowledgeable about. I think there's a lot of, it's very opaque in terms of the way the visibility and data sharing rules are set up. We do have privacy plans and we do have those documents, but I think there's not a lot of communication around that as well. So if you ever want to advocate for a different sort of data sharing or increased data sharing, that is something that would go through the COC. So we do have bodies, the Data Collaborative, the HMIS Committee for Balanced Estate, and those are the bodies that could decide that data sharing should be wider or more restricted if you prefer. So just keep that in mind that these are rules that these are policies that have been established, but are malleable with conversation and policy updates.
Lisa said, "Is this something we need to request? We can currently see services in Maricopa County. However, we can only see entry exits for BOS."
You should be able to see more data in Balanced Estate than in Maricopa County. Especially with the change that we've just recently implemented, Laura was mentioning that during the announcements, we changed the ROI functionality of Balanced Estate to allow data to share more easily and as expected. So we can connect with you afterwards, Lisa, to get some examples of what that would look like. We've seen a couple instances where data wasn't sharing as expected. So we like to connect with you and make sure that we can see some client examples and really troubleshoot the issue.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay, so managing household, sorry. This is just something that recently came up where there was a data issue, so we just thought we kind of go over it a little bit. So we do want users to edit existing households by adding new household members to that existing household. We don't want household members to be deleted or removed from the household on the households tab. And then if a household member leaves the project, then you would exit them from their client profile. So again, I think we've covered this before, but we do see issues now and then where, again, it just causes data quality issues if there's more than one household on the households tab. So just a reminder to your people entering data. So just a review or training on the data quality response type for date of birth. So we just wanted to review these as well. So for date of birth, data quality, when full date of birth is selected, that just means that the complete date of birth was provided by the client. If the approximate or partial date of birth is selected, this means that the client cannot provide their full exact date of birth, but is able to provide their age within 1 year. And then client doesn't know. Use this if the client doesn't know their date of birth within 1 year. And then client prefers not to answer. So you would use this if the client, use this if the client prefers not to answer, if they don't want to provide their date of birth or age, sorry. And then data not collected. So you would use this when there was no attempt to collect the client's date of birth. So basically, the question wasn't asked what their date of birth was. So that is when you would use data not collected. And then for Social Security data quality response type, the slide is incorrect here. That should be Social Security number. But if they reported their full date of birth, that just means a complete and valid Social Security number was provided. And then if the approximate Social Security number was provided, then that is just other than the complete and valid 9-digit Social Security number, regardless of the reason, is provided. Sorry, this slide is really messed up. Okay, so client doesn't know. So you would use this option when the client doesn't know or does not have a Social Security number. And then client prefers not to answer. is when a client prefers not to provide any part of their social security number, regardless of the reason. And then data not collected, again, that just means there was no attempt to collect the social security number for the client. So again, you didn't, the question wasn't asked what their social security number was. Okay, questions?
Well, before we read the questions off, just as a note, as Laura mentioned at the beginning, we did put the link to our HMIS website into the chat. So if you do go on the website often or want to take a look at it now and you have any input on what could be updated or changed about the website, we are going through a website redesign. So please provide any feedback in the Q&A section, and we'll definitely take that back to our marketing team. But it does look like we have 2 questions on topics we've already covered. Stephanie, do you want to read the questions?
Yeah, so the first one is, so if we want to stop doing a or if we want to start, sorry, we want to start doing a data sharing with other or receive more data sharing privileges, who do we send it to?
So again, this is a great question. And maybe just going over data sharing functionality in the default settings would be a great topic for AATW. If anybody's interested in that as a topic, you can just throw that in the Q&A or raise your hand for a vote. But we can talk about that more in depth at a future AATW. So it depends on the continuum. So Balance Estate, as I mentioned earlier, their data does share globally if the client does consent to sharing of their information. So if the client does consent to sharing their information in Balance Estate, especially since we retooled the ROI functionality, that data should share just based on the client consenting, saying yes to the ROI and sharing their information. For Maricopa County, there's really only 2 avenues to move forward with. So the first avenue is if there's another agency that you want to be sharing data with. If you agree with that agency, you can communicate to the HMIS team and you can say, hey, we have an MOU, agency A and agency B. Can you please make sure that our information always shares with each other at all times? There are some existing data sharing groups out there already. And so too much to talk about right in this particular webinar. But if you want to meet or discuss with that or submit a help desk ticket to talk more about this topic and what data shares there are, we'd be happy to answer that ticket and provide more information. But in Maricopa County, the first option is really just notifying the help desk that you want to share information with an agency and they want to share information back with you, and we can make sure that information is sharing the way that you would like. The second option would be to change the default sharing standards for the continuum as a whole. So this would be a longer process. This would be going into the collaborative. This would be going to the board and saying, hey, we think that this data should share globally across the board unless the client declines to share their information because it would improve care coordination. So for Maricopa County, at a default, that's really the UDE information, but that'd be the second route. So the first route, submitting HMIS ticket, letting us know that you and another agency want to share data or a group of agencies. And the second route is changing the way that we really at a default share information.
Okay, the next question says they want it to go back to the vendor selection process. Can you shed any light on who is being considered?
Yes, and if there's more specific information you would like on the vendor selection process, please type that information in the chat and we can provide more details. The vendor currently being considered or that has been approved to move forward is Green River. They're the same vendor that manages the Dwell warehouse in Arizona as well. And so this would just be the addition of an HMIS component on top of the Dwell warehouse that they already manage. It is contingent on all 3 OCs being agreeable to that as a possibility. So for example, Balance Estate, the board earlier this month said, hey, we're happy to move forward with exploring, not necessarily guaranteeing, just exploring what the option of Green River would look like in terms of contract and changing that over, contingent on the other 2 COCs also approving that as well. So long answer short, Green River is the one being tentatively considered, but there's still a number of steps, including the TPCH board approving that this afternoon, just for the purposes of consideration.
Nicole is asking if we select data not collected, client prefers not to answer, or client doesn't know, does that make a difference on any reports? I've always been instructed that those options can't be selected because it messes with reporting and every question must have a complete answer.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of questions that have it depends answers today. So for this particular question, it depends on what report you're running. So if I'm thinking about the COC APR or the ESG CAPR, the response of data not collected, client prefers not to answer, or client does know can create an error for data quality. What type of error it creates is different depending on the response. So data not collected is considered missing information, and client prefers not to answer, client doesn't know is considered a different category of incomplete information. For the COC APR, that's how that would work. For the 252 data completeness report, and that is the report that says, hey, is there data present? I believe it is only data not collected that will be considered incomplete information, and client prefers not to answer, or client doesn't know is considered a truthful answer that is not missing. So the data completeness report card, the 252, is looking at missing information, which is just data not collected or literally blank, whereas the COC APR will consider any of those options, data not collected, client prefers not to answer, or client doesn't know as a potential error. That being said, there are data quality thresholds. So for both continuums have a completeness data quality policy as well as completeness. In Maricopa, it's either 98% or 95% depending on the element. And in balance of state, depending on the element, it varies a lot. But we're trying to advocate for 98% because realistically, you will not have the information sometimes. The client will not answer sometimes. They may not know, they may prefer not to answer. So it is totally acceptable if that is the legitimate and accurate answer that the client provides to enter that information. In no case should you be sort of, as an agency providing or collecting information, be dinged or sort of, judged for having a percent error rate in terms of some of that data, because that's just the reality of the situation often. And you can always go back and correct that later once the client is more comfortable or is able to provide the correct information if they learn it, or they just develop a relationship with you. So they definitely will cause errors in different types depending on the report, but that doesn't mean you should avoid those entirely. It really is a concern because we expect those answers sometimes, but it really becomes a concern more when if 50% of your clients are saying, client prefers not to answer, data not collected, and a different agency only has an issue 1% of the time. At that point, it's a question, is this an issue with the clientele, or is this the issue with the way the agency is collecting data? But I definitely encourage you, as if those answers are correct, then definitely do use those because that is appropriate and accurate.
I think that's all the questions. Just gotta thank you from from answering her question earlier. We'll go ahead and conclude this month's webinar. Thank you. We do appreciate your feedback, so go ahead and complete the survey at the end of the webinar. There is a spot in there as well. If you have any suggestions for our website, you can put that in there, or email the help desk. You can email me, Stephanie Grader at solari.inc, with any website suggestions. So we'll go ahead and hang out just for a bit if there's any other lingering questions, but thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.